And welcome to the first 30 on Thursdays of 2013. We're going to jump into today's topic, Nintex, take a preview of Nintex 2013. But before we do that, go through some housekeeping. Again, for those of you joining us for the first time, 30 on Thursdays is a bi-weekly 30-minute webinar series that we've been doing now. It'll be 2 years, I believe, this April. Where we cover anything and everything related to SharePoint. Our next webinar is scheduled for January the 24th at 1:30, like always. In that session, we're going to be joined by a guest speaker for 3 strategies for making enterprise video valuable in SharePoint. We'll continue to update our schedule throughout the year. We're doing 2 or 3 of these a month. And you can get that full schedule at www.susqtech.com/webinars. Today's session is being recorded, and it'll be available shortly after the session today. So if you have to duck out or you want to share it with somebody else, you can get to that at susqtech.com/archive-webinars. And we have a great archive, since we've been doing this now almost 2 years, of archive webinars that cover everything from design to document management to metadata versus folders. So if you're interested in anything to do with SharePoint or any topics, go ahead to susqtech.com/archive-webinars. During today's session, if you have questions for me as we go through today's subject matter, go ahead and use the question window in GoToWebinar. We'll handle all the questions at the end, just to make sure we get through the material. In addition to doing the 30 on Thursdays, we here at SusQtech do a number of other SharePoint education type events online, including monthly webinars that are more training in a 3-hour format. We've got one coming up on January 31st, Maximizing Search in SharePoint 2010. We also doing more and more long format or multiple day training of our standard classroom curriculum online. And we're kind of relevant to today's topic. We offer Nintex Workflow 2010 training. It's a 2-day class, and our next online class for that is coming up in March 13th and 14th. You can get all that information at susqtech.com/online training. And for all those webinars that we've done in the past, we do have them available as recordings. So these are some of the ones that are currently available at susqtech.com/online training. You can go ahead and check them out. I think there's some previews, and then they're available for download if you want to see any of these topics. So without further ado, we're going to jump into today's topic, which is, again, Nintex 2013 preview. I am Steve Witt, and I will be acting as both the presenter and I'm typically the moderator on these. So I've asked Julia Oates, also from SusQtech, to be our moderator today. So if you have questions through the session while I'm presenting and demoing, she'll be able to answer you in the chat window or the question pane. So let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to do in the half hour that we have today, or actually 25 minutes now that we have today, is I'll give a little bit of background on SharePoint workflows and how Nintex kind of fits into what SharePoint does from a workflow standpoint in SharePoint 2010, and then jump into kind of a comparison of SharePoint 2013 and the features that were in Nintex 2010, and then what's ultimately in Nintex 2013, and then go over the roadmap of where Nintex is taking their products once 2013 is finally released. We'll go ahead and do some demo. Can't have this be all PowerPoint, and then we'll save time for questions at the end. So just to get some background to start, kind of set everybody who may be joining us for the first time about what SharePoint offers in terms of options for workflow. I'm going to start specifically talking about SharePoint 2010. And you have a couple of different options depending on level of complexity and skill set to do workflows in SharePoint 2010. You have the out-of-the-box workflows that SharePoint comes with, and they come with a number of workflows that you can kind of use what I'll say as is. Approval being probably one of the most popular in the fact that if you want to have a document approved, you have an approvers group, and then people can approve that. So you just basically enable that pre-created workflow. So I'll call that out of the box. And then if you wanted to design your own workflows to meet your business processes and do some composite solutions, you can use SharePoint Designer as a mechanism to kind of go to that next step and do some workflow creation on your own. In 2010, it does have some limitations, so anything you can't do in Designer, your next step from there is going up to Visual Studio, and then that's kind of where you get into developers using the workflow framework to develop workflow solutions. So as you kind of go up, you can see as you get more and more complex, and the skill sets needed to do workflows gets higher and higher as you kind of go up from out of the box to Designer to Visual Studio. And then in 2010, Nintex is not the only third-party workflow application. There's plenty of third-party workflow applications that do different things. We're going to focus today on Nintex and compare that to what you get with SharePoint. So that's just a little bit of background on what you kind of get baseline if you're running SharePoint 2010. And this was a similar approach in SharePoint 2007. Just added some feature function as you move to 2010. But the underlying three-tiered approach to workflow has been pretty much the same because it's all built off the .NET workflow framework. So what Nintex adds to SharePoint workflow, and again, I'm going to speak about SharePoint 2010, but this is maybe a little bit more general. It has a graphic designer, a graphical design element to it, which is drag and drop, whereas Visual Studio and even some of the SharePoint Designer stuff is a little bit more like writing code or composing code elements. There's 100+ actions that you get kind of pre-bundled that allow you to build out your workflow. And it comes with some management tools that you really don't get out of the box with SharePoint. And more specifically than adding all of that on top of what SharePoint 2010 does, Nintex has a whole bunch of other things that it adds that SharePoint 2010 doesn't really do. Things from interoperability with web services and third-party applications, Microsoft CRM, to things like lazy approval and other things. And this is all done in the web browser, which is a little bit, we'll talk about this in a second, a little bit different than the way SharePoint handles it with the need for either SharePoint Designer, Visual Studio, or in some cases Visio Pro. So we kind of looked at, all right, what you get in SharePoint 2010, and then what does Nintex add in 2010? And the question a lot of people are asking is, okay, with the kind of the introduction and the fact that SharePoint 2013 has been out there to look at for a while now, what does 2013 add to the table that might have already been in Nintex, i.e., is SharePoint catching up to what Nintex can do from a workflow perspective? So some of the things about SharePoint 2013 and the major thing about workflow in SharePoint 2013 is a completely revamped workflow architecture. The current architecture and the architecture that has been in use for a couple of years has been replaced with a Windows Azure framework, which allows you to host workflows externally, either in the cloud or on-premise, and kind of host it separately from your business applications. And this is consistent to what Microsoft is doing with what I'll say code development and custom applications on top of SharePoint, trying to separate the SharePoint itself from the add-ons or the custom development you might want to do to preserve the integrity of SharePoint and make upgrades easier. In addition, in SharePoint 2013 for workflows, you have a new designer. You have SharePoint Designer 2013. You also have Visio professional integrations for doing some of that drag and drop stuff that you could do in Nintex in the web browser, you can do in Visio Pro. And new features and capabilities, and I'll get to those on this next slide here. As I mentioned, you can do drag and drop in 2013. You can do configure and draw with Visio. You get templates. Microsoft has done a good job about giving you more options and more logic and business logic that you can do to build out your workflow. Things like loops and for each iterations and getting into like state machine workflow type of things, and then integration with REST services and using that for pulling in third-party data. So if we look back at that big list of everything that kind of Nintex provided in SharePoint 2010, and you look at, okay, what of that list would drop off because it's now available in SharePoint 2013. These are the big ones. I'm sure there are more as we get further and further closer to launch, but these are the big ones that that we've noticed that you couldn't do in SharePoint 2010 out of the box that you now can do in 2013 out of the box. So this kind of gives you a list of, SharePoint out of the box is moving forward, but you still get a lot more with Nintex. And kind of do it side-by-side comparison, and we could go through each one of those and have probably a philosophical discussion or a featured function discussion about which is better. But this is kind of keeping it at a high level because we only have a short amount of time today. So if you look at some of the pluses about SharePoint 2013, you can do more out of the box. Those are those features I just mentioned. And you can do it at no additional cost, right, because it's built in out of the box. It's not an add-on. Nintex is an add-on, and it comes at additional cost. SharePoint 2013, you still have that need for an external client, whether it be Visio or SharePoint Designer. Nintex continues to be all browser-based. SharePoint 2013 has they've called no manageability, but it's limited manageability is what you get out of the box, and this is things like workflow tasks and workflow management. And you get a nice arrangement of those with Nintex right there out of the box once their product's installed. And I think the big thing, and this is where where Nintex has really taken their company and their product, is on the ease of use front. Nintex's updated, I would say, tagline has been workflow for everyone, and they're really targeting business users that want to do more powerful business automation. They want to do more with SharePoint, but they want to do it without writing code. And so you get easier, better reporting. You get these reusable actions, and you get integration actions, so you can drag and drop things and integrate with third party without the need to write code. And you can do all of that in SharePoint, don't get me wrong, but that's where you need Visual Studio, you need some coding knowledge and things like that. So you compare them side to side, there's still a definite value proposition for Nintex, and the company has been pretty good about staying on top of what Microsoft is doing and making sure they're a step ahead. So I'm going to talk about that next. So Nintex for 2013 and where they are going with their product. There's good news for early adopters, like we'll see in a second. 2013, Workflow 2013 released in December, and that's what we're going to show here in a second. And then the Forms product for 2013 is going to be available this month. So that's great news for early adopters, people that already have Nintex or looking to go to 2013 quickly. They can get their existing workflows over there and ready to go at launch, or right now, as a matter of fact. And then we'll call that kind of a Gen 1 release, which is essentially the 2010 functionality available in 2013. So these things can get up and running in 2013. And this was a purposeful decision by Nintex to make sure that everything would run for the early adopters when the product was released. What's coming down the pike in Q1 and into the middle of this year is the Workflow 2013 product for Project Server, Nintex mobile apps, which we'll look at in a second, and Nintex Workflow 2013, what I'll call vNext, because I don't know how they're doing their version numbers, but essentially this is going to run off that new Azure framework. So the version that's out there now and available for download on 2013 uses the what I'll call classic SharePoint workflow framework, and the one that's coming out mid-year will use the new Azure framework. And that's important because Microsoft did such a departure and revamp that they had to do a kind of a release in between 2010 and the current framework and the 2013 Azure framework. So I'm going to kind of cover three big areas here, and again, I will get into demo. Mobile, social, and cloud are where Nintex has focused a lot of their R&D efforts, and where their products, the next-gen products, the ones that are coming out in Q1 and Q2, will focus. So mobile being big for everybody, and this kind of is in sync and lockstep with what Microsoft is doing, is big. Nintex started it in 2007 with their lazy approval, which is essentially the ability to respond to an email from your phone or other device that said approved without the need to go back to the SharePoint site. They enhanced and built upon that in the launch of their Forms product last year. Actually, it was the year before. Be able to design forms for specific devices, and they're going to take that even further this year with native Nintex apps. And we're going to see, and I'll cover, and I can do it only screenshot only, a native Windows 8 app. We're going to see a Windows Phone 8 app, and then we're going to see iOS apps for iPhone and iPad. And if I go ahead, go through this kind of quickly. So you can see this is a Windows 8 app that would run off, off your Surface or off your desktop, off your PC, run on Windows 8. And it allows you to basically get to your forms, your workflow tasks, see the status of what's going on, everything right within in a native application. And they're taking that forward. You can see here, zoom in on the screen. Unfortunately, this hasn't been released yet, so just showing you some screenshots from their early alpha. And you can see your tasks, you can see your forms, you can actually see the specific field data and everything. It's not just a web browser wrapped in a Windows 8 app. It's actually a native app that runs and can be docked on your sidebar. Here's some of the other forms that you would have available. Here's the form that you would actually fill out. You can add attachments to it, that type of thing. So that's pretty exciting that there's going to be a native app for your end users, the people that will be consuming or using the forms, not necessarily creating the workflow, but using it, allowing it to be accessible from pretty much anywhere. And the same can be said for the iOS apps, where you'll be able to easily go in, see your forms. You can fill out leave request forms, expense forms, etc., all from your iOS device. So next we're going to talk a little bit about social and what Nintex is doing on the social front. And the big thing, again, this is if you're following what's going on with SharePoint 2013 and with Microsoft's integration of Yammer, that's probably the biggest social feature that you'll see in 2013. And Nintex already has, and it's even available in the current version to a certain extent, is Yammer integration. And this will only become more important as you look at 2013, as that integration gets tighter between Yammer and SharePoint 2013, you'll be able to do more workflow-wise. And you'll be able to get pretty creative. Some of the examples that Nintex has been showing is, crowdsourcing documents or using what people are posting to their Yammer feeds to generate workflows and do automated responses and things like that. So there's going to be a lot of potential there once 2013 comes out and has that full Yammer integration. They also have Facebook integration, Twitter integration, WordPress integration. Some of these things have existed, and again, I just see more and more of those types of native actions that you can drag and drop coming in the future. So here's an example, as I mentioned, a crowdsourced application using Yammer, and where somebody basically posted a document, the workflow posted it out to Yammer, asked for people to make comments on it. Once the comment period was over, it grabbed all those comments and wrote them back into the document. So that's just one example of how you can use a workflow and the social capabilities of SharePoint 2013 and tie them together to better enable your business. And the last piece, and again, Nintex has been pretty good about this all along, is the ability to do cloud and do things on the cloud. They're going to continue to add additional actions via Azure if you've used Nintex Live. And Nintex Live also hosts forms so that people can, in the current version, can fill out and submit forms without having to have access back to the network on their mobile device. And then again, with the release of 2013 in SharePoint Online, you'll be able to add Nintex to your SharePoint Online site in the App Store. And I'll take a look at that here in a second. And you'll also be able to integrate it with on-premise SharePoint. So we'll go ahead and jump into a quick demo here. So I'm going to move this over here. All right, so here's a 2013 site that you'll see, and I have a press releases document library. This is an out-of-the-box document library where I have it on-premise here at SusQtech. I'm going to go ahead and post a Word document to that. It's going to go through an approval process, and at the end of that approval process, once the Word document has been approved, it's going to go ahead and publish out the final document, the Word document, to my Office 365 SharePoint 2013 SharePoint site, so that I can share that with partners and other things, or I can make it available anonymously for people to see it and other things. And this is just a quick example of walking through the workflow capabilities of 2013, and then how you can integrate some of those things like social and cloud and other things. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into my document library. I'm going to go ahead and add a new document. I'm going to go ahead and browse. And I've got a 30/30 press release ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I'm going to go give this 30. And we'll give it today's date, and Steve Witt is the contact. I'll go ahead and hit save. Okay, so there's our press release. I'm going to go ahead and go to the new menu here. Go ahead down, go to workflow. I'm just going to go ahead and take a quick look at our workflow so you can see the actions and kind of see the design interface while I go ahead and kick that off. So here's our press release workflow. So again, this is the snapshot of the workflow that we have already created. So when I kick it off, it's going to send a notification to the approver. It's going to go ahead and assign a task to the approver. The approver can either reject it, of which it will send me, the originator, a notice that my press release was rejected, or if it's approved, it's going to go ahead and send a notification, say it was approved, and then it's going to go ahead and and this is one of those actions I talked about where a cloud-based action that you can get from Nintex Live. You can drag and drop it, put in your login credentials for your Office 365 account, tell it what library to publish it to, and at the very end it's going to go ahead and publish that out to the library. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start here. So it's going to go ahead and you can see our workflow here is in progress. I'm going to come over here to another login where I have the approver already logged in. I'll go ahead and refresh. And then here's my task, so I'm going to come out here. I'm going to go ahead and edit the item. So again, here I'm logged in as a different user that was designated as the approver for all the press releases. I'm going to go ahead and approve it and hit OK. And while that's moving along there, our workflow now is moving past that. It's sending a notification out back to the originator, which is the other account I was logged in as, letting me know that my press release was approved. And then if I move back to my other browser window here, I'm going to go back out to my site. So here I'm on Office 365. You'll see I have a press releases document library here, and then once that workflow is done running, you will see that you have the ability, it'll show up here. So it's publishing it from an on-premise installation of SharePoint 2013. It's going through a workflow process, taking it out to Office 365 and posting it on my Office 365 site. Now, as I mentioned, one of the cool things about what Nintex is doing with Office 365 is I can actually, let me go into this library and we'll take a quick look. Now, again, I'm still in the cloud, Office 365. And if anybody wants to play around with Office 365 and SharePoint 2013 and the Nintex 2013 preview on Office 365, you can go get a free trial. So I'm going to go ahead and come out here and go to my library and just show you. See, here we have Nintex workflow. And again, it's still all browser-based. I'm going to get a pop-up window because it is a trial. I'm going to go ahead and hit close here, and I'm just going to I have an existing workflow out here. So I've got a press release workflow. I can open it. Then I can design this to be whatever I want. So I could have another workflow that's set up that says, all right, once it's published out to Office 365 and it's available in a public, at a public location, I can turn around and use another one of those Nintex actions. In this case, I can have it post the actual press release and a link to the press release to a WordPress blog. And again, very similar to what I did with Office 365, you put in the credentials of your WordPress site, you put in what you want to actually have show up as the post on your WordPress site. You can use parameters and variables from your list in your document and publish it out. And when it's all said and done, you've taken a document from a draft in Word inside the enterprise through a workflow, published it to Office 365, and ultimately published it out to a WordPress blog. So it gives you an idea of all the stuff that Nintex has ready to go right now on SharePoint 2013, and then some of the things that they have coming down the road in terms of mobile, social, and cloud are only going to get better as the year goes on and SharePoint 2013 hits the market. So let me go back to our kind of wrap up here because we're hitting the top of the hour. So, and I know it was a quick look at 2013 in a half hour, but Nintex is definitely, as I mentioned many times, is definitely in lockstep with what Microsoft is doing. And they're hitting the key points that you hear from Microsoft. If you go to any Microsoft event, Microsoft is about social, they're about cloud, and they're about mobile. So we took a look at what Nintex is doing to kind of stay ahead of the curve there and stay in, what I'll say, lockstep with Microsoft. The nice thing right now is where they are is they have that base support for early adopters. We took a look at the 2013 version on a 2013 environment we had on premise, as well as the beta or the preview of SharePoint 2013 in the cloud. New features are going to continue to come, and I would imagine that Nintex is going to continue to grow Nintex Live with more actions that are integrated natively with third-party applications. They have integration with Dropbox. They have integration with SkyDrive. They have integration with the box. They have integration with Amazon. And I would see that to continue to grow, and that's going to be where a lot of the power in pre-software releases or in between software releases, you'll be able to get more and more out of your Nintex investment. And one of the things that, excuse me, that we've seen is, in a lot of cases with Nintex, it's not a if you need it, it's kind of a when you need it. As you outgrow what you can do natively with SharePoint, and there's a lot of organizations that can get by and are completely content using what SharePoint can do out of the box. But at some point, as the adoption of SharePoint grows, the business users demand to be able to do more with SharePoint and do more business kind of apps or composite solutions. Something like Nintex becomes more and more important. So with that, I will open it up to questions. My contact information is up here, so if I don't get to your question, please feel free to email me. Right now is the best way to get a hold of me, and we'll try to answer your question. Hold on, just pulling up the question. Bear with me a second. So the first question is, sorry for the delay, I was just reading through the questions. Will the recording be available afterwards? Of course. This will be available on our site probably within the next day or two. We posted them under our archive webinar section. Next question is, in 2013, will there be drag and drop around in folders within sites? Yeah, I mean, that's one of the new things in 2013 is the ability to do drag and drop from desktop and into SharePoint very easily, much more easily than you can do in 2013 or in 2010. And that's one of the things that Microsoft is really touting as one of the big, from a user standpoint, one of the big advantages in overcoming a hurdle that they've had in the past with uploading documents and getting documents into SharePoint. So next question, this is a really good question. Does Nintex 2013 work with default SharePoint engine, i.e. the 2010 or what I'll call classic version? Does it work with the additional install with the 2013 manager? So, and I probably glossed over this more a little quicker than I should have. So the Nintex currently supports, and what is the version that is available now for download, supports the classic workflow engine. Which is the non-Azure workflow engine and the workflow framework. The version that will be out mid-year will be the version that leverages and is built upon the Azure framework. So this is kind of a two-step process that they need to do to get from having a product built on the classic engine in 2010 and 2007 into 2013's new Azure framework. So the version that's out now works only with the classic. It doesn't work on the new engine. And then the version that will be out later in the year will work on the I'll say the 2013 Azure-based architecture. Next question is, how does it work? Because again, I showed an example of on-premise and in the cloud. The cloud version of Nintex is licensed a little bit different than the on-premise version. I believe the cloud version, and we haven't seen pricing on this yet, but the cloud version, the Office 365 version, like most of the apps that you can get in the App Store, are probably going to be based on a per user, per month model, much the same way Office 365 is priced, whereas the on-premise version is based on per web front end. And then the last question I have in here, and unfortunately I don't have a good answer for, is when is the free cloud trial period going to end? And I haven't seen any good. I mean, that's going to go in conjunction with when 2013 is actually going to hit the streets. But if you sign up for one of those accounts, like I had my account out there, they're pretty clear when you log in and set up that account that none of the data in there will be retained. It is truly a preview. And I would say the same thing about the Nintex 2013 preview. So you don't want to do anything out there that you have the intent of maintaining or going to the final version once it's available. This is truly a preview version, and what I was showing just was to show the difference between what you can do and how you can integrate using some of the cloud capabilities between on-premise and in the cloud. And looks like that's all the questions. Looks like we went a little over. I apologize. So I'd like to thank everybody. Again, this webinar will be available for download or viewing on our website within the next couple of days. And we'll have our next session in 2 weeks where we'll get into doing video in SharePoint and how you can kind of leverage the capabilities of SharePoint to get more out of your video assets. Thanks, everybody.